am Chris Kinney, and I'm here to present the moderator for this evening's visual effects panel. And they picked me to do that because I am married to him. So, not that I'm biased, but I'm just really smart for marrying this guy. So yes, the moderator for this evening's visual effects panel is Sean Kinney, award-winning filmmaker and physical comic. We live in Los Angeles. He's worked for all the major studios: Disney, Warner Brothers, Buena Vista, ESPN, Miramax, Film Roman, History Channel, Discovery Channel, Fox, Game Show Network, among others. And he runs his own production company, One Stooge Entertainment. He was special effects supervisor on the TV series Donkey's Cove, and most recently he won 3 Telly Awards for a music video that was very special effects heavy. And I will let him introduce the rest of the amazing panelists. So, without further ado, Sean Kinney.
Woo! Woo! Oh God, yeah!
I love this energy.
We're all in for it now.
So, thank you. Not only is she my wife, and I really appreciate that, but her law firm is one of the leading sponsors, so we really appreciate her sponsorship. We really appreciate her being an entertainment attorney as well, and taking time to come out, talk to all of the filmmakers and everyone here that's picked her brain today. And so it's been very nice. We really appreciate it, the support of you and here for her. So let's start. So to my left here, we have Eric, whom we all know from his work that we just saw. Eric's been working as a special effects artist for the past 15 years. Doesn't look old enough, does it?
Shucks, I'll take that.
And has been fortunate enough to he's worked with Steven Spielberg on AI, artificial intelligence, and Sam Raimi on Spider-Man 1 and 2, where he was the man who's behind Doc Ock's Tentacles. Yeah. Got the inspiration from a bad bout of sushi one night. Very interesting. He also works as a visual effects artist on numerous TV shows. American Horror Story, we all love. Criminal Minds, Glee, Alphas, Luck. And he's directed short films for Devin Devlin's company, Electric Entertainment, and written numerous episodes of The Storm Hawks for Cartoon Network. The Last Push, this is his feature film debut. Can you imagine that is your first feature film? Please, ladies and gentlemen, say hi to Eric.
Hello.
Next, we're going to see a little bit of his work, is Patrick Rodriguez. Patrick is all the way down to my right here. Patrick, he's a senior illustrator, pre-visual artist, and technical director for studios including DreamWorks, Lucasfilms. If you like South Park, that was a little bit of his work as well. Also worked in Marvel. This is an opening sequence he did for Star Trek. He's also worked on other major big films like Iron Man 2, Cowboys and Aliens, Pirates of the Caribbean, On Strange Tides. He did some work for The Incredible Hulk. Other big films like The A-Team. As I said, he works in all the previs for all these shows, working with the directors, conceptualizing and working out what the sequences will be, how they'll look, and how the scenes are going to come together in pre-production. Also, he's a concept artist. He was the first guy, if I'm correct, ever to make it into the union as a pre-vis artist. He has been a pioneer for that, for pre-visual artists getting their chance to be more than second-hand super graphic gurus, right? Also, he's a conceptual artist, works on creating these environments as well as playing in them. He lives in Los Angeles. I'm happy to be a godfather to his beautiful son, Cole. He has another son, Grant, and obviously he's married. Ladies and gentlemen, say hi to Patrick, everybody.
Next is Jerry. He's the 8-foot-tall person next to me. Jerry, he's our local here for the Vegas scene. He earned his bachelor in film from UNLV in 2001. He wrote and illustrated a bi-weekly comic strip called Primal Squat for the university newspaper and had illustrations published in a variety of all the local newspapers here and magazines. He worked his way through college drawing caricatures at various hotels on the strip. He was a full-time artist for almost 7 years. Jerry founded Lightforge Studios. It's a full-service production company here in Las Vegas. And he's been working full-time as a writer, director, cinematography, and editor, shooting dozens of commercials, television shows, as well as corporate and instructional promotional videos, and for the shows and entertainers on the strip right here. a lot of people, especially local, heard of Thor at the Bus Stop. Well, this is him right here. It was his first feature film with his brother Mike Thompson. Their film made plenty of festivals, including Cinevegas 2009, Austin International Film Festival, and while there in Austin, they won a special jury mention for independent filmmaking. And cool thing about it, his Thor at the Bus Stop also had a limited theatrical release. Most filmmakers aren't that privileged to get a theatrical release on their very first film out of the gate, so awesome job. Ladies and gentlemen, say hi to Jerry. So the title of the panel, it focuses on smaller budgets doing amazing effects with all the new technologies. Let's speak to that concept first. When I was on Dante's Cove, I was the special effects supervisor on season 1. We basically thought, what practical effects can we do that we could then turn over to the post-production house to make them look cooler. It was supposed to be a visual effects heavy series, and it was very poorly planned. And it's sad when you have a budget such as that, and with poor planning, we didn't have the ability to flesh out everything as much as we should have. With that in mind, and speaking of that, there was no pre-visualization, and it was just a matter of what we could come up with. We filmed on a small island 1 mile by 7 miles wide, so it was kind of what can we come up with. I know everything would have been better with pre-visualization. So we'll start off with Patrick. Patrick, since you are kind of the pre-vis guru, can you speak to what might be better, having that background in pre-visualization, how independent filmmakers that don't have $100 million budgets can use that and use the technologies that are within that field to save money and get bigger effects from their productions?
I had some thoughts on that because I had a chance to work with a very small production, and I think unless you're in the great category where you are a special effects like supervisor practically, right? That's kind of like what you've done.
Yeah, I've done some of that. Yeah.
If you're that guy,
Yeah.
that's awesome. But if you're not that guy, based on my limited experience with a small production, TMZ or TPZ, I think they should do tests with if they can get somebody who's going to be their acting visual effects supervisor, they should get them in on day 1, even in the brainstorming sessions. If they're going to be doing special effects, they should get in the person who's going to be doing it for them, or the liaison or whatever, like from day 1. And that will prevent so many problems. And ask themselves what's possible for them, but not necessarily what's possible under the sun. Because I think that's a major problem why people find is that they're like, well, if I just do this, is it, how do I say this? It is, everything's possible, but you might need a team of people and you might need specialists and everything else. If your visual effects guy says he can't do it or she can't do it, then maybe you just shouldn't do it and not worry about that it is possible. Just say, okay, well, what do you suggest? And then maybe go with those suggestions and stuff. But I think experimentation too, like even if they're like, yeah, I think I can do it. It's like, well, why don't we just shoot something and see if we can composite it and make it work. Like one of the major things I think that the production I was on was that he had a lot of whip cams and a lot of movement and stuff. And in the end, it was like if he had done just lock-offs and then he did the movement of the camera afterwards, even though it was done in like 2D pans and things, it would have been a lot easier to do. So it's just scaling things back, even going way old school where you lock down the camera so that you can literally don't have to do any 3D tracking. I don't know if I'm going way over people's head, but anyways,
I can translate.
Those are all my thoughts.
Well, Eric, while you're translating, so you've done a lot of the A-list work.
Sure.
So you've been at that level, but this is an independent.
Correct.
So can you speak to the stuff you used and the knowledge and the tools or the software you used on the A-list and how you scaled or transferred that? Because I assume this wasn't 100 million, it was 90 million, right?
87.
87 million. So on that's such a small budget of 87 million, how did working in the A world and now doing an independent,
Sure.
what translated down and what methods did you find were easier?
You know, and it's a lot, what you were just touching on, Patrick, is that the notion of trying to get it in camera to see, you know, when you're on set and you have a great idea, and it's very easy to say, well, you know, we'll just do that later. we'll do it in post. We'll fix it in post is the buzz phrase of today. And the reality is that maybe it's better to see what you can actually shoot. Because a lot of times you can shoot stuff live in camera that will end up looking better than it will be, even though you may not think it's the exact gag that you went after, you'll make something that looks authentic and real and is grounded in reality. So, and then you're kind of forcing your creativity to take over as opposed to leaning on the talents of others down the road. My primary background originally was in practical effects. So everything I did was based on what I thought I could do on set. And a lot of the explosions we set off of sparks and everything, this was all live on set. It was way cooler to get sparks raining down on Kari and bouncing off of his body than it was for me to try and, to put them in later. But, today, there's some great software out there that's free. All of you can go get Blender right now, and it's free. It's a pain in the butt to learn because it was written by 9,000 people from around the world in 20 different languages. But once you get the hang of it, you can render out some pretty cool stuff in there, and you didn't have to pay $5,000 for a license or borrow it somewhere from Maya. And then there's the cool thing also is today you can go for free. You can go to videocopilot.net. Not to plug a site that I have absolutely nothing to do with, other than to say, I went to this website, which was simply some guy giving tutorials on how to use After Effects, and I learned everything I needed to learn to actually get a job being a VFX supervisor from this guy giving away tutorials for free. And it was little stuff like, hey, you want to make it look like you blew your buddy's head off with the shotgun? This is how you would do that. And it's a fairly entertaining 15-minute tutorial, and then you start realizing, wow, man, if I just shot that a little more smart, maybe lock off the camera or not walk all over the set with it, then you start, combining with what you can do on set and what you could do later. So I guess the short answer to the question of how to pare it down to little is to realize that there's so much that can and should be done live on set, and try everything there before you go into post-production, and then also to learn everything that you can learn, which is gettable for free and not hard and can be actually very entertaining, so that when you go on set and well, I'm not going to be able to get this awesome head that's going to blow guts all over the wall, but I do know a guy who knows After Effects. So I'll just shoot the scene wisely. So I think that there's a lot of resources out there right now that will teach you how to do things smartly.
Jerry, with your independent film, what was your process for the kind of pre-visualization? Like, how did you think about your shots and determine how you were going to go about those to get the effect or the look that you wanted?
Well, on our movie, we do a lot of little visual effects in our stuff, in our short films, and in our features. And our stuff's all independent, self-financed. So having any visual effects in them at all usually impresses people because they don't feel like they should. But like on our feature, there were strategically placed little effects in there, and we just thought it all through beforehand, and we didn't have any pre-visualization tools necessarily at our disposal, but we always had a very clear idea of what we wanted to do. And part of our approach is to do everything very quickly so people don't have time to really scrutinize it. Like, most of our effects, startle you. I couldn't pull off anything like this where you're staring at a spaceship for a long time because you have enough time to really stare at it. And most of our visual effects are people's heads exploding or getting hit by cars and stuff.
Which are all awesome.
Thanks. In our feature, there's a part where a guy walks out into the street and he's messing around. He has like a gun in his pants and it falls down the front, and he's trying to pull it out the bottom of the cuff of his pants, and then he gets hit by a car. And it's very convincing, but it's because it happens really quickly, so fast that it always gets a really loud gasp when people watch it. And like after it's screened, we had like 3 different clients write commercials around people getting hit by cars because they're like, you guys can make people get hit with cars. Let's do it. And which is irritating because we wanted to do it shot for shot exactly the way we did our movie. I always found ways to I found ways to make it completely different, but in a 6-month period, we had 3 completely different car hits, because we were car hit experts for a couple of months.
So, but what I got out of that is have a clear vision of how you're going to do it, and quick cutting and quick shots is a good way to cover if you don't have all the money to sit on a shot and have all that rendered out. Well, speaking of, so I watched the Star Wars like for the 800th time with a buddy, and I realized something when I was watching Star Wars, that a lot of the effect, now this is the first one that came out, Star Wars 4, if you want to think of it that way. But when it came out, I noticed a lot of times you would see a lot of people and there would be an explosion, and when the fire went away, people would be laying on the ground. And I thought, so stuff that just covers the screen and kind of hides the action behind it is a great cover. And then, like you would see models shooting at each other, but then Lucas, like the outer space scenes of ships flying and shooting each other, 20% of those action scenes are the models, but 80%, just like in your film, is right here. Like on The Last Push we just watched, when he was going for the burns, all the drama lied right in his face. And the frustration, the anxiety. So I learned that if you have big effects, you can show like the hero or establishing shot for a second or two, like you're saying, and then you cut to the actor's face, and all the emotion and the emoting and the story progression can lie in that shot, which is really not an effect shot.
Well,
do you have any suggestions or hints like that? Anybody?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm gonna take what you're saying and roll with it because it's right. I mean, they say in acting school that 90% of acting is reacting, and that most of the story, as in writing, when you're developing a character, most of what is that character is learned from how other characters react to that character. So it's the same thing with an effect. And frankly, not to talk too much about this film called Star Wars, whatever that was, but in Empire Strikes Back, I firmly believe that what made Yoda rock was a whole lot of Frank Oz, but a lot of Mark Hamill looking at that puppet and making it look like he believed that thing was alive. So, I mean, I think that you'll get a lot more mileage out of everyone really selling it than you will out of you selling an effect.
And even whenever people try to do showing it, like showing the actual act, and there's so many examples where it's either labeled as gratuitous, or it's like, they actually showed it happen. It's like, okay, now we're gonna have to NC-17, or it's rated R, or it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta cover my kid's because in the past, or in other films where there's more censored, or maybe you just show the guy going, and blood splattering on his face. But if you show the actual act, all of a sudden it's like in a whole other way. And that's just for horror. But if you just show like Yoda actually in a fight for a long period of time, you start to go,
that looks
yeah. Reaction shot.
I liked it better when he was just sitting there.
And it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And we're talking about George.
Yeah.
And yet, even he, must have, because you look at it now and you're still kind of like, it's really hard to pull off an alien doing anything. I mean, even in Avatar, you're like, they look real. And you have to stop maybe sometimes and check yourself and go, they look real. Wait a minute, I'm not thinking about the story all of a sudden. And that's not good either. So
we do that a lot too, where like right when it gets to the hard part, you just cut to an easier angle, but people just fill in the blanks. I mean, like we did a 48-hour film. We did the 48-hour film competition a few months ago, and in the first 10 seconds, we had a meteor hit the ground that irradiates everyone and gives them superpowers and cancer. But that's the punchline of the movie. But anyway, the meteor comes down and hits the ground, and streaking a meteor through it happens so fast it's easy. And then there's an explosion of dirt, and we got on Video Copilot and stole some. They have these things called Action Essentials where they have explosions and stuff. They'll look really good for a second, but then it would hit and explode, but we couldn't fake in a crater. So while the dirt was still in the air, you cut it to a close-up of somebody being startled, and you throw particles coming up out of the ground, and it's really easy, and it really sells. Everyone, point is you cut as soon as it gets hard and make it easier. And watching other movies, it's funny how often, once you learn that kind of thing, you notice that they do enough to startle you, and then they cut to a person's face, and they just have a little bit of easy stuff in the foreground.
And a lot of times, too, when you're editing, and you're like, oh man, I'm just really struggling with this bit that requires all this stuff to make it sell. And sometimes that stuff could be visual effects, and sometimes it could be, voiceover or music or some other thing that needs to be added. You're struggling. But if you just all of a sudden cut it. And all of a sudden, the scene works better, and it sells. The viewer's imagination is far more powerful than anything that we can make, and should that aspect of filmmaking should always be honored, I think.
I had to stunt coordinate once this scene where this serial killer finally gets the girl he's been stalking and he beats her, but they were the actor, so it's called actor action, and the girl she just wasn't that great as far as doing action, right?
Sure.
And she was half tied up anyway. So I took a note from Hitchcock, exactly what he just said. Their imagination is always worse, kind of like a Blair Witch type thing. And whenever he tackled her down to the ground, he went to hit her, but right as he raised his hand, the lamp fell on the ground. They were in shadow, but how the lamp was angled, you could see their shadows projecting on the wall, and the whole fight sequence was done in shadows, and everyone was commenting how nasty and eerie and brutal that was, but we were just showing shadows. You saw none of the hits, there was no blood, there was nothing, but everyone filled that in their brain, how graphic it was, and it was just a shadow. It was so, he didn't have to punch close to her, he's punching this far away, but in shadow, it was crossing the line. It looked brilliant. So you're right, letting people fill in the gore, the explosion, the effect, the crater in their own head is a wonderful device. Any other tips or tricks? Anybody?
Never forgetting that. I mean, really, Jaws and the original Alien are far creepier than any recent shark movie or even Prometheus. Because staring at the alien running around isn't scary. Seeing a shadow move in the hallway or seeing a shape of a shark under the boat is way scarier than seeing the whole beast. And although, the mantra on Jaws was that the shark doesn't work, so we better shoot something else. That movie's a classic today because of that. If they didn't have to sit there and figure out, well, I guess we're going to have to talk for about 20 minutes about something. What about how that boat that sank during World War II? That's like one of the best scenes in cinema history, just because the darn shark didn't work. So I think that especially in the world of low budget filmmaking, and frankly, I think even up the scale, let the audience have their own imagination. Let them bring their own, fears and nightmares to the table, and I think you'll tell better stories.
Perfect point.
Lock your cameras. No. No, it's funny because I remember when I first learned on the job, like, oh, you could just do that shake and post, and I was like, and we're talking about previs where it's all virtual anyway, so you're like, well, why? And it's like, because you still have to play blast the see individual frames, and so for like a independent person, you shoot it, but in like After Effects or whatever you're using, you can jiggle it. Like let's say there's a car coming and you're doing it, or is it an earthquake? You can jiggle a little and look at it and go, oh, it doesn't look right. And you can like play with the jiggle all day long. You know what I mean? Whether it's a you're on a plane, or whether you're it's a crash cam or whatever it is. You can mess with that later. But if you have literally shake the camera ahead of time, that's it. Like you're done. Like you can't go back in and then straighten that out very easily, and kind of then apply another shake on it. But that was just a real eye opener years ago. That I remember, like, oh yeah, it's like a paradigm shift where you're like, oh yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. And even easy camera moves, if you get enough resolution in your camera, you can do little pans and things. And then if everything else is moving, it doesn't alert the audience that, oh, now we're going to have a special effects shot because it's static, because you could still do some little subtle moves, push-ins and things. People don't notice that, like, oh, they're just pushing in on it, like, they're doing like that effect of that guy who's famous for just pushing on photos.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, where it's like, wait a minute, there's no parallax. Oh, well, okay. And people still accept that to this day. You see it in big budget films where there's no parallax, and you're like, okay, nobody really cares.
So the independent filmmaker, lock off your camera so it's easier on the render or for adding the effects. And if you need an effect to be adjusted, adjust it in post, right?
It's a good tip.
Okay. I'm just trying to recap.
Yeah.
If you do want to move the camera, just make sure the shot's short. Sometimes it helps. If, we've done things like that where like it's a lot easier if the shot's only 20 frames. It's not, you can almost motion track things by hand. I've done that.
If it's only a couple of frames.
If it was a tracking shot where you're running through a house, it would be a nightmare.
Lots of blur on that.
Yeah, but
on the post effect.
Yeah, but every once in a while, it kind of actually helps plant the effect in the shot. as long as it's short, but usually ours are, because they're usually sloppy.
Yeah, I noticed from the old Star Trek to the new Star Trek, the old Star Trek, the shake when they were hit by a photon or something wasn't as good as the next generation. I think they just perfected the camera shake and people move at the same time, you know, but it was effective, it worked, you know. Should we practice that now?
Yeah.
Getting hit? Oh, God. Sometimes it works.